When a simple woman solved the impossible math problem in just 47 seconds, the world couldn't believe their eyes, and her story became a beacon of hope for millions. Meena Sharma lived in a quiet corner of a small town that most people had never heard of. The town wasn't famous for anything. There were no big shopping malls, no famous colleges, and no fancy restaurants. But it was home to kind-hearted people. Small tea stalls, old buildings, and narrow streets where children played in the evenings. Meena had spent her entire life in this town. She wasn't rich, and she didn't want to be. She believed in living a simple, honest life. She worked as a cashier at a small grocery store near the bus station. Every morning, she would get up early, make a cup of strong tea, read the newspaper, then leave for work. At first glance, there was nothing special about her. She wore plain cotton saris, always carried a cloth bag, and had a calm face that never seemed angry or sad. Most people who passed her wouldn't give her a second look, but those who knew her a little better noticed something unusual. Never used a calculator at work, even when people bought 10 or 15 items at once. She would quickly add up the prices in her head and give the exact total, sometimes faster than the billing machine itself. When children from the nearby school came to buy snacks, she would gently challenge them. "Tell me the price of 2 chocolates and 3 packets of chips before I do." The children loved her and often lost to her quick mind, but she always smiled and gave them a sweet anyway. Meena had always been like this. Even as a child, she saw numbers differently. When other children struggled with math, Meena found it fun. She said numbers talk to her. It's not in words but in shapes, colors, and patterns. While her friends saw a math problem as a difficult question, Meena saw it as a beautiful puzzle. She could look at numbers and almost feel the answers. Her teachers were amazed, but in those days, no one thought of testing her abilities beyond. The school books, her parents, though proud, were poor. They couldn't afford college fees. So after finishing her basic studies, Meena took up small jobs to support her family. Years passed. Meena's talent with numbers remained a small, hidden part of her life. She never tried to show off. She never bragged. Even when customers at the grocery store told her she should be doing something bigger with her brain, she just laughed and said, "I like where I am." Every evening after work, Meena would go to the town library. It was a quiet place, with dusty shelves and old wooden chairs. There she read whatever she could find. Mostly math books, puzzle books, and sometimes science magazines. The librarian, an old man with thick glasses, often saved new books for her. "You'll like this one," he'd say, handing her a thick book filled with complicated problems. And Meena would take it home like it was a treasure. But Meena never told anyone how fast she could solve those problems. She didn't think it was anything special. To her, solving a hard math question was the same as someone else cooking a perfect dish or painting a beautiful picture. It gave her peace. It made her feel alive. Still, sometimes she wondered what her life would have been like if she had gone to a big college. If someone had guided her, if someone had noticed how gifted she really was. But she didn't complain. She believed that everything happens for a reason, and maybe, just maybe, her moment would come someday. One rainy evening, as she walked back from the library, she saw a group of teenagers standing outside a tea shop, watching something on a mobile phone. They were laughing and shouting, clearly excited. Meena stopped for a second, curious. One of the boys saw her and said, "Didi, come see this. Professor has given an impossible math challenge. He says no one in India can solve it." Meena smiled, nodded, and walked on. But that word impossible stayed in her mind. That night after dinner, she searched for the video on her old smartphone. The internet was slow, and the screen was small, but finally, the video loaded. It showed a well-known professor from a big university standing in front of a blackboard. He explained a math problem that had confused scholars for years, called it the unsolvable puzzle, and challenged anyone to solve it. Meena listened carefully. At first, it sounded complex, too many symbols, strange terms, and long sentences. But as she watched it again and again, she began to break it down in her mind. She saw through the layers. She ignored the difficult words and focused on the pattern behind the question. And suddenly she felt that familiar feeling, like when a song you know by heart begins to play. Her eyes lit up. Her hands started moving. She grabbed an old notebook and a pen and began to write, in her small kitchen under a dim yellow bulb. Mena worked silently. She didn't feel nervous. She didn't feel rushed. The numbers spoke to her, and she listened. Her mind raced, not in confusion but in joy. It took her less than a minute, 47 seconds, to be exact. She stopped, looked at the answer, checked it again. And again it was right. She felt it deep inside her. Like a painter knowing that the last brushstroke was perfect. Like a musician ending the song on the perfect note. But then she laughed softly. "What now?" she whispered. Who would believe that a grocery store cashier from a small town had solved a problem that experts couldn't? She thought about telling someone, maybe the librarian, or her manager at work. But she didn't want to sound crazy. What if they laughed? What if she was wrong? But still, something inside her told her to be brave just once. Not for fame, not for money. Just to prove that sometimes even the quietest minds can do the loudest things. For a few days, she kept the notebook in her drawer looking at it, now and then. But the world continued to talk about the problem. The video had gone viral. TV channels were reporting on it. Even famous scientists were giving their opinions. Everyone was talking, but no one had solved it. And here she was, holding the answer in an old notebook, written in blue ink, next to a shopping list and a recipe for mango pickle. MENA finally decided. She would go to the university, not to show off, not to become famous, but to see if she was really right. Maybe they would laugh. Maybe they wouldn't let her in. But she had to try. After all, life doesn't give many chances to ordinary people. And if hers had come, she didn't want to ignore it. She packed her notebook carefully, put on her neatest sari, and took the morning bus to the city. As she sat by the window, watching trees, roads, and houses pass by, her heart beat a little, faster. She didn't know what would happen next, but deep down, something told her this was just the beginning. The morning sun was just starting to rise when Mena stepped off the old public bus. She looked around. The city was already full of life horns, honking, people rushing to work, students walking with bags on their shoulders. Fast, very different from her quiet little town. For a few seconds, Mena stood on the footpath, holding her cloth bag tightly. Inside it was the notebook where she had written her solution to the impossible math problem. She had checked it again. And again, over the past few days, she hadn't found any mistakes. Her heart said it was right. But her mind still worried, what if she was wrong? What if they laughed at her? But she reminded herself why she had come. Not for attention, not for applause, just to try. Just to know the truth. She asked a rickshaw driver for directions to the university and sat silently during the ride. The driver tried to make small talk, but she only smiled politely. Her thoughts were elsewhere. After about 20 minutes, the rickshaw stopped in front of a large gate with bold letters, National Mathematics Research Institute. The building inside was tall and beautiful, made of glass and white stone, with a big garden at the front. Students in formal clothes were walking in and out. Professors with files in their hands were talking to each other in low voices. Mena had never seen a place like this before. She got down, paid the driver, and slowly walked through the gates. No one stopped her. She went to the reception desk and said softly, "I'm here about the math problem, the one from the video." The young man at the counter looked at her with confusion. Her simple clothes and nervous voice didn't match the kind of people who usually came for such things. He asked, "Do you have an appointment?" Mena shook her head. "No, but I think I have the answer," she said, gently holding up her notebook. That the receptionist looked at her for a moment, unsure of what to say. Then he picked up the phone and spoke to someone. After a few minutes, a woman in a formal black dress came down the stairs. She introduced herself as Professor Malini. She looked at Mena curiously and said, "You've come for the challenge?" Mena nodded. "Yes, I saw the video. I think I solved it." The professor raised an eyebrow, but didn't laugh. Instead, she said, "Follow me." They walked through long hallways filled with posters of famous mathematicians and complicated equations written on glass boards. Finally, they reached a small seminar room with a whiteboard, chairs, and a table. A few students were sitting there, talking quietly. When Mina entered, they turned to look. Their eyes scanned her clothes, her bag, her sandals. One of them whispered, "Who is she?" Another replied, "No idea. Maybe someone's maid." Mina heard them, but ignored it. She had grown used to such comments in life. She simply waited, holding her notebook. Professor Malini spoke to a few other faculty members and explained that this woman claimed to have solved the problem. A tall man with gray hair frowned and said, "We've had hundreds of such people since the video went viral. All of them failed." Another chuckled and said, "Let her try. It'll be over in a minute." Mena didn't argue. She just nodded politely and walked up to the whiteboard. She opened her notebook and looked at the problem once more, even though she knew it by heart. The board was clean. The markers were fresh. She took a deep breath and picked one up. A strange silence fell over the room. Everyone stopped talking. Phones were lowered. Even the laughter stopped. Something about the way she moved her hand on the board caught their attention. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't confused. It was calm, fast, and exact. Mena began to write. Her fingers moved like a dancer's. Symbols and numbers flowed out like they belonged there. Wasn't solving it step by step like a student trying to remember a method. She was seeing it, understanding it, and explaining it in her own way. She didn't look around. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pause to think. It was as if her mind already knew the path, and her hand was just following the map. 40-7 seconds. Now that's all it took. When she stepped back from the board, the room was completely quiet. No one moved. No one blinked. The students looked at each other. The professors stared at the board, then at Mena, and then back at the board. One of them slowly stood up and walked closer. He read every line of her solution. Then he turned to the others and said, "This looks correct." Another came forward. Then another. Soon 5 senior mathematicians were standing in front of the board, whispering, pointing, checking, rechecking. Mina stood silently to one side. Her heart was beating faster now, but she kept her face calm. She had done what she came to do. Now it was their turn. One of the professors finally turned to her and asked, "How did you know this method? This shortcut?" Mena replied softly, "I didn't learn it from a book. I just saw the answer. It's the way it works." Another professor asked, "Do you have formal training?" Mina shook her head. "No, I just love math. I read books from my local library." More faculty members entered the room after hearing what happened. Word began to spread. A woman from the public solved it. She's not a professor. She's not even a student. Some were impressed. Some were confused. Some refused to believe it. One man said, "Maybe it's luck." But another replied, "You don't get this answer by luck. You have to understand the problem deeply." Within an hour, the room was filled. Phones were out. Photos were being taken. One student secretly recorded a video of the whiteboard and sent it to his friend. That video began to spread. Messages began flying across social media. A random woman solved the impossible problem. She's not even from the university. She did it in 47 seconds. Outside the seminar room, the campus was buzzing. Reporters from the local news came rushing. One of the professors gave a statement. "We cannot confirm everything yet, but the solution appears to be correct. If so, this would be one of the most surprising breakthroughs we've seen." A young journalist asked Mena, "Madam, what is your background?" She replied, "I work at a grocery store in Laxmippertown." The journalist paused, shocked. "You're not a teacher or a researcher?" Mina smiled gently. "No, I just enjoy solving puzzles." That line, "I work at a grocery store," spread like fire. By the evening, major news channels had the story. "Grocery store worker solves unsolvable math problem." Headlines like this appeared online and on TV. Some people celebrated her. Some doubted her. Some wanted to know more. Who was she? Where did she learn such advanced math? Was it really her own work? Back at the university, a committee of senior mathematicians sat together to review her work again. They compared it with old solutions, theories, and past attempts. After hours of checking, they agreed. Mina's solution was original, accurate, and elegant. It wasn't copied. It wasn't guessed. It was genius. By the time Mina took the evening bus back home, she was tired but peaceful. She had no idea that her face was already all over the internet. She had no idea that thousands of people were already calling her a hero. She sat by the window again, watching the same trees and roads pass by. A soft smile played on her lips. She didn't need fame. She didn't need praise. She had only wanted to see if she was right, and now she knew. When she reached her town, the shopkeeper from across the street ran up to her and said, "Mina Didi, you're on the news." She laughed, thinking he was joking. But then others gathered around, showing her their phones. Her picture, her name. The video of her writing on the board was real. Mina didn't know what would happen next. Would people treat her differently? Would her quiet life change forever? She didn't have the answers. For now, she did what she always did. She went home, made tea, sat by the window, and opened a book. Because even after shocking the world, all she really wanted was to understand the next beautiful problem. The next morning, the streets of Mina's town were no longer quiet and empty like they used to be. From tea stalls to tailor shops, people were talking about only one thing: Mina Sharma. Some had seen her face on TV. Others had read her name. In the newspaper, a few had watched the video where she stood in front of a whiteboard, calmly solving a math problem that experts around the world had failed to answer. The most surprising part for everyone was not just that she had solved it, was that she had done it in just 47 seconds. That number had become magical now. People were whispering it like it was something unbelievable. At the grocery store where Mina worked, customers were already waiting outside before the shutters were even lifted. Some came to buy their usual things, but most came just to see her. "She works here?" one man asked in surprise. "She coming today?" another asked, holding up a phone that still showed her photo. The shop owner, a kind old man who had known Mina for years, looked both proud and confused. Inside her small house, Mina was sitting on the floor, drinking her tea slowly. She had not slept much. Her phone had been ringing non-stop all night. Calls from unknown numbers, messages from reporters, and emails from people she didn't know. Her face was everywhere. Some messages praised her, calling her a genius, a role model, a legend. Others were strange. Some doubted her. Some asked for interviews. Some even offered her money to appear on talk shows. It was all happening so fast. She had never wanted attention. For most of her life, she had lived quietly, reading math books, solving puzzles, and working with numbers in her mind. She had never imagined that one day the whole country would be talking about her. But now that it had happened, she didn't know what to feel. A part of her was happy, another part was scared. She looked at her old notebook again, the same one where she had written the solution. It had lines of math, but also small drawings, to-do lists, and even a shopping list from last week. This was her world, simple, peaceful, and full of learning. But outside that peaceful world, a storm was growing. At the National Mathematics Research Institute, things were moving quickly. The professors who had witnessed Mina solving the problem had now confirmed her solution as correct. They were shocked not just by the speed at which she solved it, but also by the simplicity and beauty of her method. One of the senior professors said she didn't use any advanced formulas. She saw the core of the problem and attacked it directly. That kind of clarity is very rare. By afternoon, top scientists and mathematicians across the country were watching the video. Some had doubts. "It can't be true," one said. "There must be some trick," another argued. But when they examined the steps on the board, they found no mistake. Everything matched. The logic was clean. The final answer was exact. Soon, international eyes turned to the story. Famous universities in America and Europe heard about Mina. Some professors there tried to challenge her solution, only to find that it stood strong under all tests. Within a day, Mina Sharma had become famous in countries she had never even heard of. Journalists from around the world wanted to talk to her, Science magazines wanted to feature her on their cover. But back in her town, Mina was still trying to figure out whether she should go to work or stay home. When she finally stepped outside, a group of reporters were already waiting. Microphones were pushed toward her. Cameras clicked. "Have you always been this brilliant?" Mina felt like running back inside, but she stopped. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I didn't plan any of this. I saw the video, I felt the problem, and I tried. That's all." Her calm voice surprised the reporters. One of them said, "But you're not a trained mathematician, right?" Mina nodded. "No, I never went to college. I just love numbers." The interview clips went viral within hours. People were amazed at her modesty. She didn't speak in complicated language. She didn't try to act like a genius. She was just honest and simple, and somehow that made her story even more powerful. In the evening, a large black car stopped. Outside her house, two men in suits came out. They introduced themselves as representatives from the government's Science and Technology Department. They told Mina she had been invited to the capital city to receive a special award from the UHL president. "You are a national treasure now," one of them said. Mina blinked, unsure of what to say. She had never even been to the airport, let alone the capital. They looked surprised, but said yes. As days passed, more and more people came to meet her. Some brought gifts, some brought proposals. A famous businessman offered her a job with a big salary. A television company asked if she wanted to be a guest on their quiz show. One of the top colleges offered her an honorary doctorate degree. Mina was grateful, but also confused. All her life, she had lived away from the spotlight. She had never wanted fame. Now it was chasing her. In her quiet moments, she sat by the window and thought, why had this happened to her? She wasn't smarter than others, she believed. She just saw math differently. She loved it not for marks or money, but because it made her feel peaceful. It was like music to her mind. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe loving something deeply gives you a power others don't have. Meanwhile, old neighbors who never talked now visited her daily. Former classmates, long forgotten, sent her messages saying they had always known she was special. Even the children at the store looked at her with wide eyes, as if she were a superhero. One evening, the university where she had solved the problem invited her again. It's time not to test her, but to honor her. A large event was organized. Big banners showed her photo. A professor gave a long speech, saying, "In a world full of degrees and titles, Mina Sharma reminded us that true intelligence comes from curiosity, not certificates." When she was invited to speak, Mina stood silently for a few seconds. She looked at the audience, young faces full of dreams. Then she said, "I am not better than you. I am just someone who never stopped loving what I loved. You don't need to wait for someone to give you a title before you believe in yourself. You just need to keep learning, keep exploring. Answers come to those who stay curious." Surrounded by lights and applause, Mina remained the same inside. The same woman, who drank tea by the window, who helped school kids count their change, who read math books by candlelight. Fame hadn't changed her. She didn't let it. She had seen how quickly people can praise you when the world is watching, and how easily they forget when it's not. Her feet stayed on the ground. The truth was, what had happened was rare, almost magical. But it had also shown something important to the world, that brilliance can come from anywhere. That sometimes the most extraordinary people live the most ordinary lives. Mina had never planned to become a national figure. She only wanted to try just once to see if her mind had seen the truth. And now that it had been proven, she wanted to go back to her normal life. Except now, normal was no longer so normal back in her town. People had started calling her Mina Madame. Some even asked her to open a coaching center. She smiled at the idea, but politely said no. It just needed kindness and time. So instead of starting a school, she began spending her evenings with children at the library. She brought simple puzzles, fun games, and easy tricks to explain big ideas. The kids loved it. For them, math had always been scary. But with Mina, it became fun. And every time someone asked her how she had done it, how she had solved the world's hardest problem in just 47 seconds, she gave the same answer. Always with a soft smile, because I didn't know it was impossible. After Mina's solution became famous, life changed dramatically for her. But change didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, like a river that grows bigger over time. The world was watching her now, waiting to see what she would do next. People expected her to do more, to prove herself again and again. Some even questioned whether this was just a lucky moment or the start of something bigger. Mina, however, stayed calm. She had never been in a hurry. To her, the journey was as important as the destination. In the days that followed her national recognition, Mina faced many challenges. The attention that once seemed exciting now felt heavy. Reporters knocked on her door early in the morning. Cameras followed her wherever she went. Strangers stopped her on the street to ask questions. Sometimes she felt overwhelmed. She missed the quiet mornings when she could sit alone with her notebook and think. But she also understood that this moment was special, and she had a responsibility. Not just to herself, but to the many people who had seen her as a symbol of hope. One of the biggest challenges was the pressure to prove herself again. Many mathematicians and scientists wanted her to solve even more difficult problems. To publish papers, to explain her methods in academic journals, they invited her to conferences and workshops, hoping she would join their world. But Mina had never studied math in a formal setting. The complex language of research papers and university lectures was new and confusing to her. She was not used to the technical jargon or the strict rules of academic writing. Despite this, Mina decided to try. She wanted to learn. She enrolled in an online course to improve her understanding of higher mathematics. She spent hours watching lectures, reading textbooks, and practicing problems. Sometimes she felt frustrated because the material was difficult and unfamiliar, but she didn't give up. Her passion for learning kept her going. Every day she wrote notes in her notebook, slowly building her knowledge. At the same time, Mina became a source of inspiration for many young students, especially girls. In a country where education for girls was still a struggle in some places, her story was powerful. It showed that intelligence and talent could come from anywhere, regardless of background or gender. Schools invited her to speak, and she happily accepted. Standing in front of young faces, Mina shared her story, not just about solving the problem, but about the importance of curiosity, hard work, and believing in oneself. One day a teacher asked her, "Mina, how did you stay so confident? When you first tried the problem, did you ever feel scared or doubted yourself?" Mina smiled and replied, "Of course I was scared, but I knew that if I didn't try, I would never know what I was capable of. Sometimes the hardest step is just to begin." Her words touched the hearts of many, and they became popular quotes shared on social media. As Mina's fame grew, she also faced criticism. Some people were jealous or suspicious. They said, "How can a simple woman solve such a difficult problem? Maybe she copied it." Others questioned whether her solution was truly original. Respond with anger. Instead, she let her work speak for itself. The scientific community conducted several independent reviews of her solution, and every time they confirmed its correctness. To protect her privacy, Mina's family and friends became more cautious. They advised her to be careful with the media and not trust everyone. Mina listened, but remained kind and open. She believed that sharing knowledge and kindness was more important than guarding herself from the world's harshness. Meanwhile, the government recognized Mina's contribution by offering her a special position as a consultant for educational programs. The idea was that she could help design new ways to teach math in schools, making it more accessible and interesting. Mina was excited about this opportunity. She knew firsthand how many students struggled with math because it was taught in a boring or confusing way. She began visiting schools and talking to teachers and students. She introduced fun activities, simple explanations, and real-life examples. For instance, instead of just teaching formulas, she showed how math could solve everyday problems like budgeting or cooking. The students loved it. Many said they started liking math for the first time. Mina's approach was different. Was about understanding, not memorizing. At home, Mina's daily life had also changed. She no longer worked at the grocery store full-time. Instead, she balanced her time between her new consulting job, her studies, and spending time with family. She still enjoyed the simple pleasures walking in the park, reading books, and drinking chai by the window. But now, her days also included meetings, phone calls, and invitations to events. Sometimes she felt tired, but she never complained. Her relationship with her family grew stronger. Her parents were proud but worried about the sudden changes. They reminded her to stay humble and true to herself. Mina listened carefully. She knew that fame was temporary, but her values were forever. She wanted to stay grounded no matter what. One of the most beautiful things that happened during this time was how Mena remained connected to her roots. Despite all the fame, she never forgot her small town or the people who had supported her, quietly all along. She used part of the money she earned to improve the local library, buying new books and computers. She started a small scholarship fund to help children from poor families continue their education. She also held free math workshops in the community center, encouraging everyone to learn and grow. Her story began to inspire people beyond just math lovers. It became a tale about courage, simplicity, and the power of believing in oneself. Newspapers ran special features about her, highlighting not just her math skills, but her kindness and determination. Documentaries were made, showing her humble life and her big dreams. Despite all this, Mena never stopped being curious. She continued to explore new problems, new ideas, and new ways to think. One evening, as she sat under the stars, she realized that the impossible math problem was just the beginning. The world was full of mysteries waiting to be solved, and she wanted to be a part of that journey for as long as she could. But with fame and success came new responsibilities. Mena was often invited to meet politicians and business leaders who wanted her support for various projects. Some wanted to use her name for publicity, while others genuinely wanted her advice. Mena learned to be careful and wise in choosing her commitments. She said yes only to those causes that aligned with her values: education, equality, and opportunity for all. At times, Mena felt lonely. The attention brought friends and strangers, but it also created distance. People looked at her differently. They expected her to be perfect, or to always have answers. But Mena was human, with fears and doubts like everyone else. She found comfort in her small circle of trusted friends and family who reminded her who she really was. One of her closest friends, Anjali, often said, "Mena, you have changed the world. But don't forget to take care of yourself." Mena smiled and nodded, knowing the truth in those words. She began practicing meditation and yoga to stay calm and focused. She also set aside time each week to simply rest and enjoy nature. Throughout all these changes, Mena's love for math never faded. In fact, it grew stronger. She started writing a book, not a textbook, but a storybook for children filled with fun math puzzles and simple explanations. She wanted to give back to the world in her own way, making math less scary and more joyful. One day, a young girl came up to Mena during a workshop and said shyly, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Mena's eyes filled with tears. She hugged the girl and said, "You can be even better. Always believe in yourself." The journey that started with a single math problem had now become a mission to inspire, teach, and make the world a better place through learning. Mena knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready. After all, she had already done what many thought was impossible, and she knew that with patience, courage, and heart, anything was possible. After months of fame, new responsibilities, and learning, Mena Sharma had grown in many ways. She was no longer just the woman who had solved the impossible math problem. She was becoming a symbol of hope and courage for countless people. But with this new status came even greater challenges, some she never expected. Life was no longer simple, and every step she took was watched by millions. Yet Mena held on to her inner peace and kindness as if they were treasures no one could take away. One of the biggest changes was how her life now connected with the future of education in her country. The government's special education program, which she was part of, was gaining momentum. Mina was asked to help design new curriculum ideas, especially for math and science subjects. These subjects had always been difficult and boring for many students. But with Mina's ideas, the hope was that they could become exciting and understandable. Mina spent many days working with teachers, school principals, and educational experts. They discussed ways to teach children that made learning fun and less stressful. Mina often shared stories from her own childhood, how she learned math by playing games or solving puzzles at home, not by memorizing difficult formulas. She believed that every child deserved the chance to discover their talents, and that teaching should inspire curiosity, not fear. She traveled to different parts of the country, from big cities to small villages. Each place had its own challenges, but Mina was determined. She saw children who had no books, no proper classrooms, and sometimes no teachers. Still, these children had big dreams and bright eyes. Meeting them inspired Mina more than any award or praise. She realized that her mission was bigger than just solving math problems. It was about helping others believe in themselves and their potential. During one visit to a remote village school, Mina met a young boy named Ryu. He was shy and struggled with reading, but he was curious about numbers. Mina spent time with him, showing simple counting games and explaining how math was part of everyday life. Ryu's face lit up with understanding and excitement. For Mina, moments like this were priceless. They reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. Back in her town, life continued quietly, but with new respect from neighbors and friends. Some still found it hard to believe that the simple woman they knew had made such a big impact. But Mina never let it change her. She still enjoyed small pleasures, walking in the early morning, chatting with shopkeepers, and sharing chai with her family. She made sure to keep her feet on the ground, even as the world around her seemed to reach for the stars. Her family remained her strongest support. Parents were proud and happy, but they also worried about her health and stress. Mina listened to their concerns and learned to balance work and rest better. She understood that to help others, she first had to take care of herself. This balance was not easy, but she managed it with patience. As the years passed, Mina became a mentor to many young students who wanted to follow in her footsteps. She encouraged them to ask questions, to never fear failure, and to keep their minds open. She reminded them that success was not just about solving problems, but about the joy of learning. Her simple, kind words left a lasting impression. One of her proudest moments came when a group of girls she had mentored won a national math competition. They had learned from Mina's methods and gained confidence to compete with the best students in the country. Seeing their success filled Mina with happiness. She knew that changing just one life could create ripples that touched many others. Throughout this time, Mina continued to study and grow. She completed several online courses in mathematics and education, gradually becoming more comfortable with formal academic language. She even started writing articles for children's magazines explaining tricky math ideas in simple, fun ways. Her book of math puzzles became popular in schools, helping many students develop a love for numbers. Despite all the work and recognition, Mina stayed humble. She often said, "I am just a learner, like you. I have made mistakes and learned from them. The real magic is in never stopping." This attitude made her beloved by people of all ages and backgrounds, but Mina's journey was not without difficulties. Sometimes the pressure was too much. There were moments when she felt lonely or doubted herself. In those times, she found comfort in her family and close friends, who reminded her of her worth beyond fame. She also found peace in nature, walking by the river, watching the sunset, or sitting quietly under a tree. One evening, as Mina sat in her small garden, she reflected on everything that had happened since that incredible day when she solved the impossible problem in 47 seconds. It felt like a lifetime ago, but also just yesterday. She realized how much she had grown, not just in knowledge, but as a person. She remembered the first time she saw that problem on her phone, how her heart had raced, how her mind had worked quietly and steadily until she found the answer. That moment had changed her life, but it also changed the lives of many others. It showed that sometimes the greatest achievements come from the simplest hearts. Mina's story began to reach beyond her country. International organizations invited her to speak at conferences and educational forums. She traveled to foreign countries, sharing her ideas and learning from others. These experiences opened new doors for her, but also deepened her understanding of how important education was for the whole world. On one such visit, Mena met a group of students from different countries, shared their dreams, struggles, and hopes. Mina told them about her journey, the challenges she faced, the lessons she learned, and the power of believing in oneself. She encouraged them to follow their passions and never be afraid of failure. Her simple, heartfelt speech was met with warm applause and new friendships. Back home, Mina's impact continued to grow. Schools started adopting her teaching methods, focusing more on creativity and understanding. Teachers felt inspired by her story and worked harder to make math accessible. Parents thanked her for showing that intelligence was not just about tests and marks, but about curiosity and effort. One day, Mena received a letter from a young girl living in a remote village. The girl wrote, "Dear Mina, your story gave me hope. I want to be a scientist like you. Thank you for showing me that anything is possible." Reading this letter, Mina felt tears of joy. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. Despite all the success, Mena never forgot her roots or the people who had supported her quietly. She continued to live simply, valuing kindness over fame and learning over recognition. She knew that her journey was far from over and that many challenges still awaited her. But she was ready in the end. Mina's story was more than just about solving a math problem. It was about courage, hope, and the power of belief. It was about how a simple woman, with no formal training and no special privileges, could change the world by trusting her own mind and heart. Her story inspired millions to believe that no dream was too big, no problem too hard, and no person too simple to make a difference. And so, Mina continued her journey, one step at a time, shining her quiet light in a world that sometimes forgot how bright, simple hope could be.